Have you been enjoying our Impact Podcasts and our great guests? Then please give us a thumbs up and leave a 5-star review on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you consume your favorite podcasts. This edition of the Impact Podcast is brought to you by ERI. ERI has a mission to protect people, the planet, and your privacy, and is the largest fully integrated IT and electronics asset disposition provider and cybersecurity-focused hardware destruction company in the United States, and maybe even the world. For more information on how ERI can help your business properly dispose of outdated electronic hardware devices, please visit eridirect.com. This episode of the Impact Podcast is brought to you by Closed Loop Partners. Closed Loop Partners is a leading circular economy investor in the United States with an extensive network of Fortune 500 corporate investors, family offices, institutional investors, industry experts, and impact partners. Closed Loop's platform spans the arc of capital from venture capital to private equity, bridging gaps and fostering synergies to scale the circular economy. To find Closed Loop Partners, please go to www.closedlooppartners.com. Welcome to another edition of the Impact Podcast. I'm John Shigerian. I'm so honored to have with us today Kevval Hanna. She's the Senior Vice President of Social Impact and Sustainability at Edelman. Welcome, Kevval, to the Impact Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you, John. I'm glad to be here.
It's an honor to have you today. And before we get talking about all the great work you and your colleagues are doing in sustainability and in impact and social impact at Edelman, can we get a little bit into your background first? I know you live in DC now, but where did you grow up and how did you even get interested in these topics that we're going to be talking about today?
So I'm from the islands of the Bahamas. And I think for me, coming from a small island nation, always navigating its space in the world, I was really able to see firsthand what economic development initiatives could be, both positive and negative. Yeah. And so because of this, I really kind of devoted my life's work to the kinds of initiatives that I believe could change, save, and improve people's lives. And so for me, I've always stayed grounded in impact. So I think about access and equity and inclusion. And I really try to do that with a collaborative mindset. So I believe that if we can bring the best of the private, public, and social sector together, we can solve so many issues. And before I came to Edelman, I led teams working in about 100 plus cities, reimagining what government could be with the Center for Public Impact, which is a BCG foundation. And, really looking at like, what could an inclusive economy be for Roanoke, for St. Louis, for Miami, for any kind of city. And so I think that ability to work with servant leaders to really think about what that could look like is very close to my heart. I also worked with Population Services International, which is an international health NGO, partnering with corporations, philanthropists, and foundations who wanted to really transform what global health could be. So I worked with Pfizer, Merck, Unilever, really bringing the best of their minds, their people, their talent, and their resources as well to really solve some of these issues. And then finally, I'm a former World Banker. And what that meant is I had the opportunity to advise governments all over the world that were committed to economic development or gender equity or health or social investments and sustainability. Any of these big, large infrastructure projects, which have these huge, lofty goals, I came up with that mindset of like, who's at the table? Do we need to build a table with the goal of, can we create long-lasting impact? So that's a little bit about me. My family still lives in the Bahamas, and I am very lucky to have them as part of my life and my community.
That's fascinating. And I have to be honest with you. I'm 60 years old now, Kevval, and I've never met anyone who was part of the World Bank before. How does that really work? Where do you sit, and then who do you interrelate with on a regular basis when you're a member of the World Bank?
So for me, I worked in a couple of different divisions, but I was really always a social development specialist. In essence, our role was, if we're going to do a new project or a new loan, really thinking of it from the social lens. Is this going to have harm? How do we mitigate any potential harm? How do we make sure there's proper outreach and communication to the populations and the communities we intend to serve? And so for me, I had the opportunity to work in, I've worked in Macedonia. I've worked in
Wow.
DR. I've worked in Mexico. I've worked everywhere with that same lens of, if we're going to do this, let's do this really, really well. The bank was an amazing experience for me. I started the bank right out of college, and I got to see and touch and do everything, but shape the world that I believe could happen, could be. And I
Right.
thought it was really about giving people a voice and choice in the process.
What a unbelievable education, post your formal education, to have a chance to work at the World Bank.
Mhm.
What a
It was my dream job. I
wow.
knew when I came out of college, I went to school in Wisconsin from the Bahamas, so
Right?
minus 20 degrees, 90 degrees, life shock. But I always knew I wanted to work in international development. It was what I wanted to do.
Got it.
And when I finished grad school, I had the opportunity to work for the bank, and I started in the social development group, working in Latin America. Then I did some work in Africa, and then I went actually to our private sector arm, the International Finance Corporation, which looked more of like, how do you activate private sector investment in? I work primarily in South Asia, so India, Bangladesh, Maldives, etc.
For our viewers and listeners, I'd like you to share a little bit about Edelman first.
Sure.
You could find Kevval, of course, and her colleagues at Edelman, Edelman.com, Edelman.com. Edelman, what I knew of Edelman, it was always a communications company, but can you explain approximately how many employees and offices you have around the
Yeah.
world, and what's your core business model?
Yeah, so Edelman is a global communications firm that essentially partners with businesses and organizations to evolve, promote, and really protect their brands and reputation. We try to give our clients the confidence to lead and
Mm,
act with certainty, earning the trust of our stakeholders. We have offices in about 60 plus countries, about 5,000 so plus employees. We
wow.
touch pretty much every specialization, from social media to executive thought leadership to what I do in the social impact space. So we touch a lot of different aspects of what it means to be a communicator, to be an advisor, a trusted advisor in the communication space. And
Gotcha.
essentially, we help companies define and evolve their role in society, right? How do they want to be engaged? How do they inspire that engagement? And then how do they work across the entire ecosystem? My role at Edelman in the social impact and sustainability practice, which I lead at our DC team,
Mm,
is really, again, partnering with companies and brands to implement impact and sustainability initiatives that put purpose at the
mm,
heart of what they do and
mm.
build trust between business and society. So again, I do everything from thinking about the strategy to creating signature programs to creating that narrative. If someone hears you're going to do this, what does that sound like? What is it going to be? How are we going to communicate it? And I talk a lot about trust because it's in Edelman's DNA. We
Mm.
believe that it is the foundation. It's essential for social cohesion and economic growth and governance, et cetera. Without it, the world's going to be a little tough. So that's why you hear me talk about trust a lot.
So talk a little bit, that's fascinating. So talk a little bit, I mean, you represent some of the greatest brands on this planet, obviously with your 5,000 or so employees and 60 offices around the world.
Yeah.
And so what's a day in the life of the Senior Vice President of Social Impact and Sustainability look like? Like,
I play a couple of different roles. One is I am an advisor for our clients in many
okay.
ways. A client may come to us and say, hey, we really want to invest 10 million in poverty in X community.
Mm,
They come to me and I said, well, why? What are you hoping to intend
mm,
to do?
right.
Is this going to connect with your consumers, your investors, your employees? How are you going to shape this program? How do you know what's going to be the impact of your outcomes? What are your
Mm,
competitors doing? Does this even mean anything? So a lot of times I work with with clients across multiple sectors,
right.
pharmaceutical, retail, et cetera. But really, one, coming to me for advice and counsel. Secondly, I spend a lot of time thinking about the strategy. If you want to do a global impact strategy, if you want to do something new and flashy and exciting, you come to me and we'll do a discovery stage. We'll ask those questions. We'll do an audit. Then we'll think about what is it that you're going to be that is unique to you
Mm,
based on what are you good at?
mm.
What do your stakeholders want? And what does the world need? And with that intersection, we're going to hopefully create something, communicate on that, build that, et cetera. Again, with those principles of competence, integrity, transparency, and engagement.
What a fascinating role that you play, though. So it's really, you're not only in an advisory role, but you're building specifically on a bespoke basis
Mhm.
the macro model for each of these brands specific to their own needs, wants, and goals from the ground up. You're building a 360-degree plan for them, looking at all those issues and data points that you just mentioned. So, my gosh, I mean,
John, here's the thing. Not every company is the same, right?
And
so when we look at society today, people expect more from business. What that doesn't mean is that you do every single thing, right? And so for me, I use those practical experiences, working in the mountains of Peru, working with the governments of Uganda, and working with all these different places, and bring that practicality to the table and say, hey, X brand, you got this piece, you got this piece. Here's what you're going to be known for. Here's where you're going to get credit for. And it's going to fit with your business goals, as well as your employee goals and your consumer goals, et cetera. I think that sometimes brands or companies think, oh, we have to do everything. We have to speak on everything. Maybe sometimes you should pause and reflect, and hopefully bring folks in like us who have that experience and that knowledge and can push and pull on different levers. But business is expected to do more. And that's one of the reasons why I came to Edelman, to bring that practicality and that experience so that we can actually do things that are authentic and not just check boxes.
Understood. That's fascinating. I grew up in Queens, New York, and went to one of the first integrated elementary schools back then in the late 60s and early 70s. And I also have lived long enough to have lived in Los Angeles during what was then called the Rodney King riots, now is retermed the LA riots. And so I'm always interested to hear my guests' thoughts and opinions on where are we today. In many ways, I thought we would be so much further down the road in terms of race, gender, ethnicity, harmonization in this country. And it just seems as though we've come far, but way not far enough to where we really should be and where we need to go. How does, I'd love your thoughts on that, number one, and then follow into that, your role at Edelman in giving those who have been disenfranchised historically, giving the voiceless a voice, and those who have been disenfranchised or marginalized a voice and more of an opportunity to participate in this great democracy, which is now close to 240 something years old.
Yeah. I mean, your question, your perspectives on, well, are we farther enough? Are we far enough? I thought we were far enough. I think it really depends on a couple different factors. The first, the American experience is not uniform, right? And so your perspective is going to be completely different from your neighbor's perspective. However, that, depending on your parents' income, place of birth, all these different factors that come into this, we call it intersectionality, right? It actually matters a lot now. So that's the first thing, is thinking about how all these pieces come together to make who you are. So one, the American experience isn't uniform. Secondly, there is this increase in polarization, right? Where there's these factors around like economic anxieties or the mass class divide or mistrust or this battle for truth that further and further pulls us away. And we saw in our trust data that people trust those that are local and close to them. And before time, it wasn't really like that. Trust was again, that ultimate currency. And so there's a couple of things. So again, one, the fact that experiences are not uniform, that polarization is continuing to push this agenda that's raising anxieties and raising some of the kind of the behaviors, the attitudes that you see are rising that spew hate and violence. And I think the third thing is sometimes I think people think about life in a zero-sum game. If this person wins, I lose. Heather McGhee is an amazing author in the Solidarity Dividend, and she talks a lot about this, is that if Black people do better, it doesn't mean white Americans do less. We're actually all going to move up. So I think we're battling a couple of those things where the zero-sum game is really kind of that narrative that is playing in people's heads, coupled with that battle for truth, coupled with economic anxieties. Everyone's just closing in. And unfortunately, I think it does create this, as you can see, this narrative of violence and hate. But what I love to see is that radical joy and that radical positive spirit of people who are going to continue, who are continuing to push and fight for what they believe is right and what they believe is true. And so at Edelman, again, we try to make sure that our clients are thinking about all of these different factors when they say they want to stand up for something. So we give a lot of guidance and points of view on everything from the Supreme Court rulings to current events to employees' behavior. I mean, there's so many things that are coming up. And so one of the big things that we like to see is one, pause, reflect, bring the right people in, have a system in place, have your crisis team ready. We also do crisis as well.
Right.
So that then you're seeing the picture from all different perspectives, because once trust is lost, it's gone. It's very hard to rebuild.
It's so true. And it's so fascinating that you take a group approach, which makes total sense, which as a diverse group, which goes to the issue of diversity being such a better way to lead, make decisions. Everybody that I've had on the show, especially in recent years, when we talk about the issue of diversity and inclusivity, you just say better decisions come out of that process.
Yes.
But I love your idea of zero-sum game, both from a singular human being perspective, when you mentor folks and talk to them about, run your race. And don't worry about jealousy is such a hard, jealousy, covetousness is such a hard way to live life, both as a person and as an organization. And like you said, it's a world of abundance, because someone else is going up the ladder doesn't mean you're going down.
Doesn't mean the ladder is going down. Doesn't mean the ladder is going down. But what I think people forget then, there's inequalities in how growth or benefits are distributed, right? So the games are actually already stacked. I'm a huge sports fan, so I really think about the game stack. I'm actually a former hurdler. So for me, I have to look at the hurdle in the front of me or I'm going to fall.
Right.
I have to run my race. I have to take one hurdle at a time. And that's how I like to guide my clients through that process. Take one hurdle at a time. Don't try to do everything.
Makes sense.
But if you do something, do it with with intention and with equity embedded. And so what that means is, if you're going to, let's even use a school program, we're going to do STEM in St. Louis, in all the poorest schools in St. Louis. Fine. Okay, but what else are we doing around the school? Are we supporting the parents? Are we supporting transportation? Are we thinking about the full human, the full community? And so that's, again, pushing and guiding clients to think about how far their impact can go. Again, that outcome, the impact from those outcomes.
For those who've just joined us, we've got Kevval Hanna with us today. She's a Senior Vice President of Social Impact and Sustainability at Edelman. To find Kevval and her colleagues and all the important work they're doing now in social impact and sustainability, please go to www.edelman.com. Sustainability, is a term that goes back to, let's just say, most recent times. Let's say it goes back 20 years or so, when Al Gore started popularizing it with Inconvenient Truth and everything else. But now has also taken on this inclusive terminology of the shift from the linear to circular economy, ESG, and some of those other greater trends that are governments in the United States and around the world are focused on. And as you said, big businesses focus on, and big institutional investors, such as Larry Fink and the group at BlackRock, et cetera, one of the greatest and largest and most successful investment groups on the planet. Talk a little bit about those trends being wind at your back and what you're trying to accomplish in social impact and sustainability at Edelman vis-a-vis your clients.
Absolutely. I think the three biggest trends we're seeing is one, there's a lot of, we call it, it's like green hushing, and then green hushing and greenwashing, right? Right. So that goes back to my first point, is just ensuring that we have the right inputs, the right resources, the right story in place, so that we and our clients are not have our backs against the wall, right? The first thing is that there's a lot of conversation around green hushing versus green hushing. There's the next thing that is bubbling up to that is people are getting called out on, are you doing on business? Is just ambition? And then where's the evidence, right? After the murders of George Floyd, everyone was doing something. Now you can see there's a lot more conversations of, well, what has happened to that 18 billion that was invested in Black and brown communities? What has happened to all the Black female leaders that were leading nonprofits? What has happened to X, Y, and Z? And so again, there's a big microscope on the evidence aspect of this. So that's the second thing. I think the third thing is there's a lot of focus on local, right? What are you doing on those communities where you live and operate? You can be a global brand, but okay, well, what's happening in your New Jersey headquarters, or what's happening in your campus here? So again, really thinking about that ecosystem approach to impact. And sustainability has environment, it has social, it has governance. It reminds me of my World Bank days where I was doing social development work, but I was also looking at, well, how is this going to impact the environment? If we build this huge, transmission station, well, what is that going to mean both for the environment, for the people that don't want it here, and also from the governance perspective in terms of who gets the electricity? So again, these issues are continuously coming up. They may be called different things, but at the end of the day, it's really about how do we center people and what we hope to have, which I call as an equitable future.
Interesting. I'm a child of the 60s, obviously, so I still, remember the romantic and wonderful feelings we had towards government back then, the Kennedy era, the Camelot era, the race to the moon, and the success that we had in the space race and the things that brought our country together. As you said, we've eroded trust in good government, and the polarization in government has become huge. It then shifted to entertainment and sports, but with the democratization of the media, and now everybody is a potential reporter with a cell phone, and TMZ exists, and other things, other platforms like TMZ. We get to see all the warts of our previous heroes that we never got to see. And so the distrust has seeped in further. And then we have the most recent times, like you said, of the widening of the polarization. I remember fondly the era of Reagan and Tip O'Neill getting together for a drink at the end of the day to figure out how to create bridges instead of moats. So how, now that we are in this period of great distrust of government, of who used to be some more popular voices, real movie stars where we didn't know all their warts, real sports stars where we didn't see all their picadillos and other things that go on, in real life, because we're all just human. How do we rebuild trust in organizations and in people and in platforms that used to instill trust, that made us want to move forward and do the good work that this country really wants us to do?
I'm an optimist. I'm a cautious optimist, but I do think there's people like you and I out there, John, and a lot of your guests that believe that the future can continue to look brighter and better. I think the big thing to focus on is, like, one, we are very complex creatures, right? And when you think about how we experience trust or distrust, it's not uniform, right? And so there's a couple of things that I would signal. One, when we know, through our research, we found that trust is greatest with people closest to us. So then that gives business an opportunity as an employer to ensure that they are leveraging the truth, that they're investing in fairness, that they are leveraging the comparative advantage to ensure that disinformation does not exist in their space. When you think about government, you're thinking the government's building strong relationships. They're present. They're visible. They are bringing other voices to the table. These are very practical, actionable things, I'm telling you, right? They engage deeply with their residents. What that means is maybe you got to go to a baseball game. Maybe you have to go to a church. Not everyone's going to be able to get off at 7:00 to go to a meeting. So again, it's thinking about these very practical ways of doing it. For philanthropy, that means creating spaces to showcase local innovation and partnerships, embedding equity, thinking about your investments, and emotionally and really listening intently. When I think about trust, I want your listeners to come back to leave with this. Trust is actionable. It is the ultimate currency in all the relationships, regardless of the institutions, business, governments, media, and NGO. And it is the foundation that allows any of these groups that I've just mentioned to take risk, to act, to make mistakes, to succeed, and to lead. And so when any of these institutions are thinking about these things, they should lead with that in mind. That means collaboration. That means opening
Right.
up. That means transparency. That means as a business, you are hopefully restoring hope in the economy through your actions. So again, these are a lot of some of the ways I feel like it's important to build trust. And I've seen that in my own work, working with 100 plus city leaders across the US. That's the fabric of redefining legitimacy means in our world today.
It's so interesting, what you're saying. I want to go back to that word collaboration in a second. But as you were talking, I was also thinking it's almost unthinkable, to me, and to think that we've even eroded the trust in the Supreme Court of the United States of America. I mean, it used to be the law of the land and the most trustworthy individuals, that we could all depend upon, no matter what our private thoughts were and our own predispositions were. But even the Supreme Court has been, badly battered in
polarized.
Polarized. It's just
100% polarized. And what's fascinating here, John, is this is where business can lead. Right.
I want to hear. So what do you mean by that? Talk about business leading and what do you mean by business leading and collaboration?
Yeah. So business is business. So government is kind of a monolith. You can only with defined resources, and there's affiliations. There's a lot that goes with being government. But business, there's a couple of levels. One, they're expected to lead on issues of the social issues, right? When we looked at our research, on average, 64% of people said companies they would support companies and media outlets that build consensus to help civility and strengthen our social fabric. They wanted business to be overwhelmingly involved on a range of issues, 5 times more, like, for instance, health access. So again, when we think about how the pandemic accelerated this transformation, we think about racial and social equity. Business is unfortunately also operating in a fragmented and confusing world. But what they have is they have flexibility, they have resources, they have talent, and they have this nudge from the world that doing nothing and saying nothing is not possible anymore. It's not viable. And so for me, when I'm working with our clients and our CEOs, I'm like, you can take a stand on something like the treatment of your employees. You can take a stand on the community. You can take a stand on wealth gap. You can take a stand on diversity. These aren't hot button, tension riddled issues. These are issues of humanity. These are issues of people. And so again, I go back to those questions when I think about how you operate responsibly in today's environment. It goes back to some of those questions of like, what are you good at? What does the world need? What do your stakeholders expect? And how do you stay accountable? And again, these are very practical things for a leader to do, to be an advocate, to be a leader, to be a visionary, and to support equity and inclusion.
Let's talk about a real life example. So I'm a CEO, big corporation, USA. And I have, my inner circle, and I come up with what we think is a great idea. And we're a client of Edelman, and we're in your office, and we're with your team, and we're so excited to pitch your idea. We pitch it. And at what point, and how does the process really look like? Because of course I'm coming in with all the best of intentions.
Of course.
But now you and your team confer with each other, and you realize that really we're going down a path that won't have the intended results that we really are looking for. How do you gently talk me out of that, but give me other paths that could have better results and better consequences, and of course, better impact for everybody's benefit?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. One of the biggest things that I have to do, and where I sit is to be accountable, right, to my clients and to build trust. And what that means is to ask the hard questions, but also create that space where they know that I'm going to give them the best information and data. For example, we get clients, that come to us and say, we want to be on the big stage, Davos, for example.
Right.
That's not for everybody because, as you can see, there's backlash from Davos. And so again, using the Davos example, when a client comes and says, we want to be on Davos, or we want to have, well, what are you going to do there? What are you going to say? If you want to be in the stage, what do you want to be in the stage with? What does that mean for your risk perspective? What does that mean for your reputation? And if the decision is this is not the right time, I'm going to then come and say, well, why don't you park yourself at Social Innovation Summit or go to Aspen or Milken.
Right.
These are other great places to be. And you have now the proof points to back up what you're doing, right? Because what I don't want to happen is if you go to Davos or another conference, people are saying, well, they're missing the point of what you're even doing, which is, for instance, if you're working on like a small business for Black women, people miss that point because you're at Davos.
Right.
And so again, really making sure that I connect the dots and bring data research and like the practicality. Like if that's where you want to be, okay, we're ready with our crisis team if that comes up. But we'd rather not put you in that position.
Well, you're like, so if I understand correctly, you're trying to make sure the circles are trying to fit into a circle, not a square, and just the reverse. But also, so I come to you, you love the idea, and I want to go to Davos. You help me put that all together. We have all the best intentions.
Yeah.
But are you also is you and your team, which of course is a diverse team of lots of different specialists, also thinking about, okay, John, you're not flying to Davos on your private plane. We're not going to ruin the intent and the opportunity of that big stage and all the good impact that's going to come out of that to be sidetracked with all of a sudden eggs being thrown your way because you just you weren't really helping the carbon footprint of the world going over.
100%, John. I mean, when I think about a client, I think about all aspects. Where are we speaking? How are we speaking? What are you wearing? Right. How are you engaging versus who is on that panel? If it's just 3 white men on the panel, that's not a good look. Good for you, but that's actually not a good look, right? And clients are trusting us to give them those hard pieces of information. Trust me, there's clients who said, we're going to go do this thing that we're going to do. And my job is then to shape it and craft it in a way that still feels like it's competent and it has integrity and it has transparency. So it definitely is challenging because I work in a client-based world, but at the end of the day, they're trusting me. And I started off with, I believe I am grounded in impact. So I have said no to many things when I said, that doesn't mean anything. People laugh at me all the time on my team. They say, oh God, Kevval's saying it again. I say, what does this mean? This doesn't mean anything. This is not going to mean anything. Good that you did this, but so what? Right. And here's a so what. And I come with that mindset because I know it can be better. I know it can be greater. And sometimes people can only see what's in the front of them. And I have this little thing that I use called the 5 whys. And you just keep going, why, until you get to that answer that then tells you why the journey is this and why we're going on that journey. So again, I try to, that's kind of how.
No. But so really one of your greatest assets is your emotional intelligence to create a safe space where we are, as a client of Edelman, I feel safe enough to propose anything to you in terms of what we think our best ideas are, but you also have created a safe space where you're able to give really constructive and feedback.
I mean, yes.
You keep 100%. Us on the right side of things. Yeah.
I don't say, oh, that's a horrible idea. I start with, I'm curious. Help me understand why this event versus this. Help me understand why you want to invest in early childhood education in X city versus looking at, investing in parenting for the middle school or whatever it is. And so it's about me asking questions and understanding who the client is. At the end of the day, it's about developing relationships with people. And that's one of the greatest things I learned at working in the World Bank in over 20 plus countries around the world, people spending a budget. I had to have that cultural competency to be able to know when to speak, when to listen, but my ability to observe and listen with intention and not listen to respond, game changer, 100% a game changer. And I think that is probably one of my superpowers. And in many ways.
One of many.
And you're too kind.
Well, if I'm understanding you right, and I want to get this right, and I want our listeners to hear this. If we're going to break up, as you said, there's lots of pieces of the pie to gain trust and ways to move forward. But generally speaking, your methodology is business first on the lead, and then collaborate with good government, and media and other platforms as well. Do I have that right, or am I missing something in your algorithm and the math that you do in
Yeah.
terms of how you put together collaboration?
I won't pretend and say collaboration is easy, right?
Okay.
I will not start. I will start with collaboration is not easy, just of the multi-million-dollar collaborations I've done all over the world.
Right.
What collaboration does that others don't do is we always talk about together it's better, right? And right now, business, what we found in our research, is the most trusted institution. So that's why I'm saying business is now expected to lead. And they can take that lead because the expectation is there, the flexibility is there, the interest is in there, the expectation is there. Government plays a role, philanthropy absolutely plays a role, and they can come together. Again, I believe this umbrella, this tent kind of concept, they can come together to bring those different parts of the pie. For example, government can bring, let's say we wanted to do a reskilling, right? Government brings the policy. Government can bring the different government agencies to the table. They can bring the data. They can bring the resources and the people. Business can do two things. They can have the space. They can also have the new employment opportunities. They can also invest faster and quicker. Philanthropy can come in and hopefully to risk some of that investment that business may make. And so again, all these pieces are playing together to hopefully reskill people for the future. And so that's just kind of an example of how I see these pieces coming together. Someone has to take the lead, of course, but they all play a critical role in leveling the playing field, thinking about our future generation, and of course, finding really smart ways to bring human decency at the core of whatever we do.
I love
Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's great. So let's go back to the 5 whys.
Mm-hmm.
Recently, a friend of mine and I were talking and giving each other feedback on some ideas that we had. And he said, John, let's approach it from a different way. And it goes back to your whys, but I want to hear your thoughts on this.
Sure.
When he said to me, he said, John, when you make decisions about things that you want to do, he goes, think about, are you really polishing your resume, or are you writing your eulogy? And
Ooh.
so, and it almost goes back to Bruce Springsteen's line from his book about children and grandchildren. He goes, are you going to be remembered as a ghost to them or a real ancestor?
Yeah.
Did you really leave a mark that was true about how you wanted to be remembered, how you lived your life? Let's go back to polishing your resume versus writing your eulogy. When you are coaching and mentoring and advising and these world leaders in business and in government, how do you approach appealing to their sense of intelligence and better reasoning? Because we know a lot of these with those jobs comes huge egos. How does it work?
Absolutely. And I mean, let's be honest, I'm a Black woman, right? That's a whole nother level to navigate. A couple of things. One had extremely amazing mentors and colleagues who have reinforced that this is the space that I should be in, that I have that value and that worth. I have an amazing experience, right? I don't know many people who've worked in business, government, and philanthropy. Right. That's a triple threat. And so for me, I am grounded in my value and my worth in many ways. But what I find actually more powerful, again, that's also the ego speaking, is I will know someone's cat's name, their dog's name, how their kids are doing, how their last vacation was, because we're connecting as humans. And that's what I reinforce to our teams every day. Find out who the person is on the other line. Pick up the phone and call someone. An email is an email. Hey, how you doing? What's going on? How was the kids' baseball games this weekend?
Right.
If anybody knows me, they will look at my contact list and laugh because I put notes every time. Even the dentist, I'll say, okay, here's a dentist number. He's going to a vacation on this, or here's my kid's teacher's name and her kid's graduating, and I'll make sure to send a card. I do the basic things. I write handwritten notes. I teach my kids to do that. Thank you notes, hello notes, that kind of thing. I really believe in, at the end of the day, you want to connect as humans, right? John and I, we connected a little bit on football already. We connected a little bit on sustainability already. We connected on a couple things already, right? And so now I'll always remember, okay, I'm going to catch the Notre Dame game and send you like, oh, thumbs up or thumbs down. I mean, things like that.
Right.
I think is really, really important, is having that ability to connect as human, and it doesn't feel transactional. And I always tell people, especially younger folks that I mentor, and you send a message to someone on LinkedIn, don't tell me you want to pick my brain. Read
Right.
something I've written.
Right.
Listen to something that I've spoken about and say, that was really interesting to me. I would love to learn more because this. Show me that you've put the effort to know me as a human being. So, for this call today, I mean, I looked at a lot of your things. I kind of dug in your brain, like, why this versus this? Why is he doing this? And so that, again, I knew how to connect with you as a human. It was really important. Again, I do my homework. I believe in being prepared. I don't go into anything kind of hoping that the 5 whys will save me. I'm going to sit down and look at your profile. I'm going to look at your last 5 years of financials. I'm going to look at where you have been and where you want to be. I'm going to ask you the questions
Right.
of, well, dream with me. I say that to my clients all the time. Or ask the question, who's putting pressure on your back? Like, where is this coming from? Those kinds of things.
Let's go back to that the lost art of communication, though, because Edelman, at the end of the day, Edelman
Yes.
is a communications firm where you then have you're explaining the process, the hard work of building trust, which then goes back to really good communication skills.
100%.
Like you said, you're coaching your children in the lost art of and the lost and simple art of writing a thank you note, which very few people engage in anymore. When I get to mentor our sales team here, I say, listen, get your face out of Facebook and go get in someone's face. Go meet.
Yes.
You're going to close nose to nose. You're not going to close. I haven't never closed a deal over text message, Snapchat, Instagram, or any of the other platforms that have wonderful things that you can do with them, but also have become tremendous distractions to really.
They're table stakes. Everyone's doing it. It's not interesting. It's not exciting.
Correct.
Everybody is doing it. And I mean, I think from the communications aspect, we try to understand what are the different channels, right? Is it earned? Right. Is it social? Is it, is it some other avenue? Is it, being out there in public? Like, what is it? And so again, we try to ask those questions in terms of, amplification, audience, altitude. Are we changing perspectives? Are we thinking about, do we need to change attitudes? What is going to be our KPIs? If you know anything from me, I come from the World Bank, where we always thought about what is going to be our theory of change and how do we know if we're going to actually, have we done what we set out to do? And that's how my mind is always kind of, people may think purpose and impact is soft, but I'm thinking, how are we changing hearts and minds and changing people's lives? And I have my, different ways of, kind of shaping that. But that's really what I'm thinking about at the end of the day.
Well, that's important because at the end of the day, the CEO or the chairman or the vice chairman, whoever's come to you with their inner circle of decision makers at XYZ company is going to need those tangible results to show their board of directors, to show analysts, to show, they're going to have to, really, reveal their bona fides at the end of the day. Like you said, it's not soft.
Yeah, 100%. And it's been, and the space has been professionalized, right? Previously, it might have been someone who was there for a long time and get an opportunity in CSR or philanthropy, or it might be under legal or public affairs or whatever it is. But the space has been professionalized because it's become a very important component of business. And what I hope your listeners will leave with is that even with this expectation of doing more, you actually can create something that is unique, that cuts through the essence of your DNA, that speaks to all of your stakeholders, and hopefully leaves you with some sense of purpose of the connection you've left in this world, however you want to, whatever that looks like for you. One loses.
Let's switch topics and go to the Built for All series. What does it mean? How did you get involved, and what is its mission? Yeah.
So to give you a little background, over the last, let's say 75 years, right? The economy has grew. We've had economic transformations, technology has advanced, et cetera, et cetera. But what we found is if you click down, the benefits of economic growth have actually been unequally distributed. And so what that meant was, with this as kind of a background, I led a partnership with the Center for Public Impact, the BCG Foundation, in partnership with the MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth, where we gathered insights from Nobel laureates, heads of international organizations, some of the smartest thinkers in the world, to ask them 2 questions. What's wrong with the economy? Of course. And then how do we fix it? And so Built for All is really a summarization of what we found. And we wanted to create a North Star essentially an actionable framework that says, here's what a global inclusive economy looks like, and here's what business, civic society, and government can do to ensure that we are reimagining and rebuilding economies to ensure that three things: there's equitable access and opportunities, there's a level playing field, and that people are collectively stewards of future generations. And the hope is that, again, with these three sectors working in cohort, that we can have a future where, we're not using today's economy is not being assessed on the mindset of yesterday, but we're thinking about the future.
Got it. Speaking of the future, what are you most excited about with regards to the projects and initiatives that are now moving at Edelman in the months and years ahead?
I would say three things. One, my goal is to continue to help companies towards more sustainable business and business practices and helping them have greater impact with their customers. Secondly, I want to continue to, and I plan to continue to amplify, engage, and share the trust work. We have cuts from business and racial justice to trust to AI, et cetera. So wanting to continue to share the work so that the world can see, hey, trust is your currency. Use it wisely, use it well. Right. And then I think the last thing is I believe in impact, right? And so that can be in so many different levels, where it be working with my clients, working with colleagues that I mentor and I work with, and also just continuing to hopefully share the story of what impact could be. No zero-sum game.
I love it, Kevval. This has been wonderful. And like we shared earlier off the air, you're always welcome back on this show. For our listeners and viewers to find Kevval and her colleagues and all the important work they're doing in social impact and sustainability at Edelman, please go to www.edelman.com. Kevval Hanna, thank you for not only joining us today, but thank you for making the world a better place and making all the impacts that you've made in your very young life and what you're going to make in the future. I hope we get to connect in person in the future, and I want you to come back on the show and continue sharing your journey in impact and sustainability.
Awesome. Thank you, John. I really appreciate the time today.
This edition of the Impact Podcast is brought to you by Engage. Engage is a digital booking platform revolutionizing the talent booking industry. With thousands of athletes, celebrities, entrepreneurs, and business leaders, Engage is the go-to spot for booking talent, for speeches, custom experiences, live streams, and much more. For more information on Engage or to book talent today, visit letsengage.com. This edition of the Impact Podcast is brought to you by ERI. ERI has a mission to protect people, the planet, and your privacy, and is the largest fully integrated IT and electronics asset disposition provider and cybersecurity-focused hardware destruction company in the United States, and maybe even the world. For more information on how ERI can help your business properly dispose of outdated electronic hardware devices, please visit eridirect.com.